Thanks for joining us for WNY News Now election coverage as we continue to highlight candidates running for office across our region. Joining us today is the Democratic candidate for an NY-23, the congressional election, Max Della Pia. So thank you very much for your time and connecting with us via Zoom.
Justin, thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. First, I want to give you a chance to tell our viewers a little bit about you and why you're running for Congress.
Well, my dad always used to say, service is what gives life purpose. And I think that's the way he lived his life. And that's what I've been doing. I spent 30 plus years in the Air Force, active guard, reserve, civil service. And I consider this a continuation of that service. I feel like our system of government is at risk. Democracy is at risk. I think if we can't depend on a peaceful transition of power, we're not the beacon on the hill that we want to be. We're actually more like a banana republic, and that's not where I want to be, and that's not why I spent 30 years defending our democracy and our Constitution. So that's the main reason. But when you talk about having someone come into this district who is not from the district, Stan Lundeen 50 years ago said, "From this district, for this district." It fit then and it fits now. We don't need someone from outside to come in here. We need someone who's actually going to know what our communities need and who's actually vested in this community. And I did move with my family 10 times while I was in the military, but we chose to put our roots here. My youngest went to high school and graduated from here, and I know the people here and I know what they need, and they're very frustrated. They say, I don't think anybody in Washington's listening to me, and I don't think they're accomplishing anything. It seems like what they're doing is trying to just maintain power and avoid doing anything that's going to allow whatever the current administration is from getting any credit for doing something good for the people. But people are hurting, and I think that they need someone who's going to listen to them and to work for them, and that's why I'm doing this. It's not for power, it's not for money, and it's not for ego. It's for my country, our country, and I really feel strongly about that. That's why I'm doing it.
And I know that on both sides of the aisle, that is one thing that I think both Republicans and Democrats have agreed on is the fact that the area is hurting, and it has been hurting for the past decades, and COVID-19 hasn't improved that in any way. I want to get to some current events a little bit later on. I know gas prices, inflation. There's a lot that is on the plate at the moment, but a little bit about your political history, which I think is important for our viewers. This isn't the first time you run for Congress. You ran in a Democratic primary previously against Tracy Matrano, but it looks like now you have the party's endorsement. You are the head of the ticket, so to speak. What's different this time for you in your campaign that you hope to get across to the voter?
The atmosphere itself is quite different. The last time, I don't think people knew of me very much about me, and trying to distinguish yourself among 9 or 10 other I guess it was 9 different candidates is not easy. This time, for the last 4 years, I've been the Democratic committee chair for Tioga County, small county on the other end of the state, or other end of the district. But when I called and talked to every single one of the other chairs in the district, without an exception, they all said, "We're 100% behind you. We are thrilled that you're willing to take this on," and I'm just honored by their support. So after all those committee chairs, several, I would say 6. There's 6 committees that actually voted on it. Some of them don't vote because of bylaws or because of custom. They don't do it until after the primary. And you can understand how that might affect their willingness to do that. But in this case, they recognize that no one else has stepped up from the Democratic Party, and they were Erie County, Cattaraugus, Schuyler, Cortland, Livingston, and Tioga, and Chemung. They all unanimously endorsed me, which is a great honor, and I consider that to be a sacred trust. I will represent them and do my best for them, tell them the truth even when it's hard, and work for things that are going to make a difference in their lives. And I'm going to do that for all the people in the district, not just Democrats. This is the way democracy is supposed to work. The representative is truly a representative of everyone in the district. And just because someone doesn't vote for me, or even if they are against me, I think it's my duty to do what's best for the communities and the constituents that I'm entrusted with.
And I know that the district is going to have a little bit of a different look this year because of New York's redistricting process. Obviously, a little legal fanfare, but by the looks of it, from the experts we've talked to, that this will likely be the outline going into this fall election. On the other side of the ticket, Congresswoman Claudia Tenney, who is kind of the choice amongst Republicans running. Going into that matchup for you, this is a fairly strong GOP held district, although it always hasn't been the case. How will you go about talking to those when it comes to that general election who, maybe are on the fence about choosing a Republican because, say, they don't agree with some of the things that President Biden has done or has said?
I think I would offer them an alternative rather than rancor and poking each other in the eye and making people wonder what the thrust of people's intentions are. I think that people actually want someone who will weigh the evidence, he'll hear both sides, and then act in a way that honors their best interest. And that hasn't been done, in my opinion. And I can give you a perfect example. The infrastructure bill is something that is often in historic context. Usually it's everybody wants. There are things that everyone needs, so they work together and they come up with something that's going to make sense. Well, the person I'm running against, she voted against it, and I don't know if you noticed the Politico. There was actually a quote. She was trying to get credit for working so hard to get, I think it was 4 projects in that bill, and then she didn't vote for it, but she wanted credit apparently for having worked so hard to get it in the bill that she didn't vote for. And I think that is really, I don't know, chutzpah, I guess is the term I would think of. And if you're not familiar, Ann Landers said that was chutzpah is when someone kills his parents and then throws himself on the mercy of the court because he's an orphan. It's not right. I mean, if she feels strongly enough that she doesn't vote for something, she shouldn't try to take credit for something that has been done by someone else. And it's not just Democrats that voted for it. It was bipartisan. There were some Republicans that, in fact, Tom Reed voted for it. So that's a distinction. I mean, she's an extremist. She is not one of these people that's on the edge or someone who's in the middle. She's an extremist. And she refers to me as an extremist. She's never met me. And the people that she says I am or I duplicate or whatever, I've never met. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, certainly will shape up to be a matchup this fall. And a lot of times when you look at politics, especially after the 2016 election, I've asked all the candidates this, we now see this divide where you're either an extremist for one side or the other, or you don't always get involved in the process. When talking to people around the district, how concerning is that lack of voice? And also the movement we've seen where if you don't identify with one side or the other, a lot of times you don't get to have input in something like that. It's whoever's in charge runs the ship, where maybe not everybody is going to agree in many instances.
It's interesting, the dynamics of having districts that are safely Democratic or safely Republican. If you think about it, what that encourages is a polarization, because the person that's safe will never reach across. There is no incentive whatsoever for that person to reach across the aisle and say, let's get this done. It's good for both our constituencies. They won't do that because they won't take the risk. But we absolutely have to have people that are willing to take that risk. And that's what I'm willing to do. I'm not interested in spending a lifetime in Congress. I want to do what I can to make it better, and I want people to work together for the good of the country. And that's what I'm about.
What are some of the things that are top priority for you that you would hope to address if elected?
Jobs are absolutely critical. Um, and and once again, you can say the ship has set sail on the bipartisan infrastructure bill, but quite frankly, the money is yet to be spent, and the jobs that it will bring will be tremendous. I just for There's like 13.5 billion for New York to build roads and bridges. Um, High-speed internet, $100 million for New York. Um, Clean drinking water, 2.6 billion. Those are real numbers, and those can have real impact. Jobs are critical. Infrastructure is one thing, but we really need to support our small businesses, because that's where jobs are, and that's what moves the economy, and that's what affects the people down the street who own the restaurants and the shops and so forth. And we need to support them. One way of supporting them is to give them an even playing field with the infrastructure, high-speed internet. Small businesses need it, farmers need it, and I don't think it's really right to have our students, go to a Walmart parking lot to get Wi-Fi to finish their homework. That's not an America that I think makes sense. That's part of what should be our infrastructure, and I think that voting against it was un-American. It's not. She can make whatever excuse she wants, but when you get right down to it, she's hurting the people in her district now. She hurt the people in our district here.
Is there anything that you could do if elected to expand that outreach and maybe help in the allocation process? Because when you do have billions of dollars moving around, albeit that could be a positive shot in the arm if it's not done correctly, I imagine it could have negative implications too.
Well, I think anytime there's large amounts of money moving around, people who are not honest, um, you know, do what they can to skim off or whatever. And that becomes the focus rather than the good that has been done. But I feel that anybody who does that should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. There should not be any hesitancy, and we should go after them with all the force of the Department of Justice and everything we have at our command. So you're saying, how can I affect the allocation? I think it comes down to having you have to have a seat at the table. And I think being in New York, if I were elected to this district's congressional seat, I would have a seat at the table. It's kind of obvious just from who's where. So I would argue for what we need, and there are many needs, and they exceed the amount of, for example, ARPA funding for Jamestown. We need housing stability, and we need to revitalize neighborhoods. There's economic and workforce development. There's resident health and well-being, both mental health and physical health. And those things about health that people from perhaps the other side say, let's just everybody pay for their own and whatever. It's really not working for the United States. 21 industrial countries have some type of universal health care, and we can get there a number of different ways. We just need to work on it. And we need to take the moneyed self-interest out of it, and we need to do what's best for our people. So instead of having instead of paying 2.3 times the average of all these 21 industrial countries, we should be able to bring down that cost. And there are several ways we can do that. One is to reduce the amount of administration required. For every $3 that are paid in healthcare, $1 is spent on administration, and that's crazy. I mean, it's between 31 and 33%. Whereas, Medicare, say what you will, I don't want any government person handling my healthcare, but do you know anybody that gets to the Medicare point in their life and they say, I don't want it, thanks anyway, right? I mean, if they can do it for 3%, we should be able to save quite a bit of money and apply it to health that, instead of ending up with an emergent condition like diabetes, hypertension, those things that can be maintained with proper medical care up front. People that don't have health care, they have to wait until something awful happens to them. It diminishes their ability to work productively. We end up holding the bag anyway as a country. We end up paying for it anyway. But instead of having it just be, the treatment, we end up having them in the emergency room, and then we have them in hospital, and it's not a good result. So we shouldn't have to pay 2.3 times the average of all the other 2,100 or the 21 industrial countries. We should be able to pay something much more reasonable. And the way we do that is by spreading the risk. And how we do it specifically needs to be worked out by people who care about people and want to make this happen. It's not easy, and nobody ever said it was, except one person, and it didn't work for him. So he promised a plan, and he never quite delivered. He did it almost every week, if I recall. So
I want to switch gears a little bit and
sure.
focus on what we discussed earlier in terms of the business aspect and jobs in our district. I know that's been on the minds of many as we emerge from the pandemic. And we've seen in the last census that populations continue to decline across New York, and specifically here, where you have a lot of kids who say they partake in one of the great universities that we have across our area, and then they go and find a job somewhere else. And a lot of times people maybe attribute that to that culture of, get out of here, get out of Western New York. For you, how do we keep people in our community and build these opportunities for them in many cases where we're almost trained a little bit to go somewhere else?
The problem is if you don't provide opportunity here, and if you can't, I mean, some people could actually work out of their homes and do remote work if they actually had the infrastructure to do it, right? I mean, people from New York City are moving to Owego, and they're able to do it in some cases, but we don't have it. You go into the rural areas, and you don't have any. I mean, if we were doing this in the car, you'd be concerned that we just drop off, and we would. Um, so that's one of the ways, but there are many other ways. We can support small businesses by providing them trained workers and cooperation between school programs and work programs so that they get what they need, and they actually have a pipeline then to provide them with workers that they need. And you look at the trades, for example. I mean, if we can work out a pathway for people to do honest, good work, good paying jobs, uh, we can promise them a future that allows them to dream and to put their kids to college, through college, and take a vacation, and not be concerned about having to work until they die. They can retire. So.
Do you think that inspiration is something that we need to see here in not just Western New York, but our whole nation, where a lot of times they talk about how the greatest generation, right? These World War II veterans, and then afterwards they came home and they worked and there was no complaint. And now today, maybe not so much. Kid graduates from high school, they really don't go to college necessarily. They sit around, they work at McDonald's. Do you think that inspiration aspect is an important measure to get people to have a little pride in themselves to be able to do things?
you know i I believe that um, part of why I'm doing this is to be a good example for my family and for people around here, to say, um, if I serve and I continue to serve, um, I can help others. And the way I do that is, I'm on boards. On the Racker. I'm the president of the Racker board, Tioga Rural Ministry, which is we have a food pantry, and we help people through rough spots. We're not just handing out cash, but we care about people and how they can get, for example, somebody uh, has a transmission go out on their car, and they don't have even though they're working 2 or 3 jobs at minimum wage, they can't put enough money ahead so that they can pay for that. So at that point, they're just this far from uh, losing their job because they can't get to work. And then they lose their job and they can't pay their rent or their mortgage, and they're homeless. And that sounds melodramatic, but it's not. For real people in Tioga County and around this district, we have folks that are doing that. And that's not right. We need to have a safety net that works for them, not a handout, but a hand, and get people where they can work.
How is that line navigated between a hand out and a hand up? Because there is a lot of folks who maybe would argue, well, you could just get on unemployment. We saw it during the pandemic and live on it for the rest of your life in many cases, versus trying to navigate that avenue of assisting someone, but not necessarily going too far.
You make a good point. People uh, that are not, perhaps, are still working or whatever, uh, it makes them angry to think that someone is getting a better deal than they are. Um, but most people, once they've gotten through the rough patch and they've been able to navigate that, they're ready to work. They don't want to just subsist. And anybody who's lived on, um, on unemployment even, it's not something that's comfortable for most people. And I don't believe that that's the rule. That's the exception. People want to be independent. They want to have a house. They want to have a future for their kids, and send them to college if they can, or trade school or whatever. And I think that's what we should be encouraging.
And I want to discuss current events. I want to get your thoughts on the conflict in Ukraine in a little bit. But one of the big things that a lot of people are feeling right now is the pinch at the pump. And I know that there has been efforts nationwide to try to relieve some of that dependency, which was, in many cases, President Biden's is caused by the conflict in Ukraine. For you, what's your take on the whole gas price situation, now the inflation situation with various consumer goods, and how, if elected to Congress, would you try to navigate that? Because I imagine, unfortunately, it's going to be an issue that probably will persist in next year.
It will. And it's a difficult problem because I want to give you a kind of a story, but my stories go too long, so I know we have a brief amount of time, so I will try to be brief. Uh, One of the problems we're having with the Ukraine is um, they're being paid handsomely by the European Union for oil and gas. Um, and unless we sever that, unless we stop their ability to export and make money as they're butchering people in the Ukraine, we're not going to be able to really stop it without getting involved directly ourselves. And that is a huge, considering who it is and what's at stake and what the potential is for expansion of and you like to think that the people that you're dealing with are rational and they're thinking of all these things. Uh, they're balancing different interests, but it's clear to me that Putin really does not have any no empathy. He doesn't care about international law, the law of war. You don't attack non-combatants. He has no problem with that, and he seems to be unfazed by the pain and suffering that he's causing. We've got a 46 million person country, and it is the breadbasket of Eastern Europe, and it has many natural resources, and it has something that they've wanted for hundreds and hundreds of years, and that is a warm water port. So he has every intention of taking that whole southern area and having that as that's if you look at where his forces are and what they're doing right now, it's clear that that's his intention. And unless we get his attention, we're not going to stop him. And it's interesting to me, and this is a bit of an aside, uh, the authorization for use of force is something that has been ceded uh, to the executive branch by the Congress. And they seem to allow that and approve of that because then they don't have to take a vote and stand for anything and make a decision and debate what's the best thing. And that's the way it's supposed to be. Do you hear of any congressman saying, hey, I want to get involved in the discussion of what's supposed to happen here? No. They would just as soon have somebody else make the decision and then throw rocks at it. And that's not helpful. It's not the American, the process isn't supposed to work that way. There's supposed to be an authorization for the use of force, and nobody seems to care about it at this point. But
And
I would point out that although my opponent makes great, she's proud of her son, and I'm proud of my son. He went to the Air Force Academy. Hers went to the Naval Academy. He's a Marine. My son's an Air Force pilot. But her experience in national defense is limited. And I'm being, that's something I've been involved for over 30 years and I care a great deal about. it's another distinguishing factor between the two of us.
Looking at this conflict, this atrocity, really, when you look at some of the things that Russia is doing, what is the resolve in your eyes as a potential Congress member? Because we have these sanctions, and I know you mentioned cutting off their fuel. Does it come down to that, where we have to take that action to stop the money?
It's actually cutting off the sale of their fuel, that, and it'll have dramatic effects on the economy of Europe to do that. I mean, but so we have a historical parallel, and for those of us who studied history, and those who fail to remember the past are condemned to repeat it, as the saying goes. Neville Chamberlain came back and said, "I think we have experienced peace in our time," and it was in that same area, the Hitler taking over Poland, and the Blitzkrieg and all that, and we stood by because it's almost like, okay, just take a little bite, but there is a historical parallel, and it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad to, last night I'm on the Rotary board, and we had an evening meeting, and we had a woman who's actually living in Ukraine, and she's working to get aid through Rotary. And they've gotten it from Finland, from Denmark, from Germany, from the United States. And our club has also sent things. It makes it real. It makes people, I think instead of going to the pump, I understand that it's a pocketbook issue, and you can't not notice it. But when you see someone who's in her country and her countrymen and women, children, women butchered by Putin's armies, it makes it personal, and you say, how can we help? And that's, it is an emotional thing to watch, and it's not pleasant to look at.
Finally here, and we thank you so much for joining us as we continue our effort to highlight political candidates. Is there anything you want our viewer or potential voter to take away about Max Della Pia and his campaign as they go to the ballot box?
Well, I can't do this without you. I guess that's my first point. I believe in choice. I believe in providing a choice to the people that I care about. And unless you care enough to vote, and to vote for somebody that cares about you, you will end up with someone who has clearly shown that she doesn't care about people. She cares about special interests, her own personal businesses that have been enriched by her situation. And we deserve better than that. My neighbors, you, my friends, everyone, whether you are registered as a Democrat, you're unaffiliated, or you're a Republican, I need your help. I want you to do it for America. Don't do it for me. Do it for your kids and your grandkids, so that you can give them a future you'll be proud of and they can be grateful for. Be the greatest generation and vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Max Della Pia running for New York 23rd's congressional district as the Democrat on the ticket. Of course, for complete election coverage, head over to our website, WNYNewsNow.com, our free mobile app, and channel 716 on the